Welcome to 3WP. My name is Paul, and this is the world's worst wrestling podcast. Today we are going to be talking about the Elimination Chamber event from Jeddah, Saudi Arabia from this past Saturday. In case you are unaware, this is my first podcast, so if it sucks, my bad. We'll try better next time. Going into this event, I'm not going to get big into the politics and all of the hypocrisy of WWE running an event in Saudi Arabia. I'm just going to try and be as objective about this as possible, just go over strictly what's on the program. Although there are some parts of this event that kind of just slap you right in the face with that, but we'll address that later on. The premium live event starts out with a big video package, all the hoopla, all the fanfare, and then we go into a preview of the Universal title match. This is Roman Reigns versus Goldberg. We do a Goldberg career retrospective package, which takes out his storied career in WCW, his undefeated streak, his world title wins, and then how they kind of crapped on that when it came to WWE. But we'll gloss over that. No big deal. He was always great. Yeah, he was always great. We do a Roman Reigns package. A Roman Reigns package. Try saying that. And we have a long entrance from Roman. Dear Lord, could he get to the ring any slower? You will find out something about me, but that I am a huge Undertaker fan, and towards the end of his career, his entrances did get a bit long in the tooth, and Roman's right up there, trying to follow suit with Taker, because this took forever. Goldberg's entrance took forever, not as long as Roman's, but pretty long. And I actually checked on the ticker, and it was 16 minutes and 53 seconds into this program before the bell actually rang for this match. Yikes. We've already bought the thing, or got a Peacock subscription, WWE. You don't need to sell us on this match. It's happening. We're watching it. It's okay. Goldberg, obviously, super over with this crowd. They are big into the Attitude Era in Saudi Arabia, so Goldberg's huge. Might be one of the only places that he's over huge, because me personally, I'm over Bill Goldberg. I don't want to see him anymore. They tie up for a extended period and immediately start going to the outside. Super shortcut, super early. We're not going to have a technical wrestling match. We know what this is going to be. Let's just get to the big moves. Goldberg hits a spear. Roman reverses a jackhammer into a Uranagi. Kind of a pretty slick move. I don't know if he was intending that to be a rock bottom. Kind of like an homage to his cousin, Big Dwayne. But he just did Uranagi. He didn't go down with it for the rock bottom. Roman hits a Superman punch, does the ooh-ah in the corner. I shouldn't make fun of that. It's pretty cool when he does that. But Goldberg hits the spear before Roman can. They get a close-up on Goldberg, and of course, he is bleeding from the head already. Dear Lord Bill, what are you doing? Why are you always bleeding? If he headbutted his locker on the way out this time, I mean, just please stop, Bill. Stop bleeding from your head. You're practically a senior citizen right now. I don't need to see you bleeding everywhere. So Goldberg gets up from his spear, and he goes to hit the jackhammer. Can't get Roman up. Roman reverses, locks in the guillotine. Goldberg fights out of it a little bit, does a few slams into the turnbuckles. Ultimately, though, him and his big bloody head just can't get out of the guillotine, and Goldberg passes out, and Roman is your winner and retains the Universal Championship. This was a typical Goldberg match. I don't think we expected really anything different out of this. They weren't going to start doing catch as catch can, drop down leapfrog, hip toss. This is Bill Goldberg in 2022. This is the match we are going to get. And I personally am sick of it. I don't want to see Bill Goldberg on my screen anymore. I believe this was his last match on his contract. And if that's the case, I'm very happy because we don't need him in title matches anymore. Please stay home, Bill. We get the first Elimination Chamber match of the night. It is for the number one contender to the Raw Women's Championship, which is your current champion. It is Becky Lynch. We'll see her later in this show. First out for their entrances are Bianca Belair and Doudrop. They both look, I guess, okay, and they have to have the full bodysuit. Bianca's and Doudrop's look like an outfit that they could possibly wear as like their regular ring attire. And then Rhea Ripley comes out in a gimp suit. She is clad in leather from neck down. Looks like she just needs that mask, and she will be straight out of Pulp Fiction. Don't really know how I feel about that. I love Rhea Ripley. I think all of her outfits are really unique and cool looking. But yeah, she's in a gimp suit in this one, so that's kind of distracting. Next out is Nikki, almost a superhero, Nikki ASH. I have in my notes, and in case you're wondering, yes, I have handwritten notes for this because I am a million years old and I can't type that fast. I have in my notes, get Nikki ASH off of my TV screen. This has run its course. The superhero thing is over. Or almost a superhero thing is over, I guess you would say. She's not going to have any progression in this character if she's not going to turn into a supervillain. If this is just what we're going to be left with until further notice, I don't want to see this. I liked Nikki Cross. I thought she was a very good worker. She had a unique character, a unique gimmick. She was different from pretty much any of the other women on the roster. This is going nowhere. And please make it stop. I'm begging you, please make it stop. Next out is Liv Morgan, and she comes out in a full red leather Britney Spears cosplay. I thought it looked great. Nice homage to Britney. Next up, we have Alexa Bliss making her in-ring return. Her new entrance music is atrocious. It's god-awful. Music is kind of like, seems to be like a secondary thing for WWE in this day and age. Everybody just comes out to generic radio-friendly rap or pop music. But this is horrible. Get different music, please. Liv and Nikki start off. They actually did some good things here. Nothing really sloppy, but everything seemed okay. They had a nice spot where Nikki swings Liv right into the ring post. That was a cool spot. I don't think I've seen that before. Doudrop is out next, and Nikki tries to team up with her. Like, oh yeah, let's team up together. We'll beat up Liv Morgan. And they shake hands, and Doudrop headbutts her and tells her that there's no friends in the Elimination Chamber in her very thick Scottish accent. Doudrop runs wild for a bit on Liv and Nikki. So the next pod to open is Rhea Ripley. She gets out and immediately starts making angry faces at Nikki. These two have recently had a breakup angle. They were a tag team, but then Nikki betrayed Rhea. This tag team also was horrible. So I was glad it's over, and I hope that this is the end of their feud. Immediately, Nikki tries to run away. Eventually, Rhea catches up with her, hits her with the Riptide pretty quickly. Nikki's out. She's the first one eliminated. Next out is Alexa Bliss. She comes out and runs wild on Rhea and Liv with her. She hits her moonsault knees, her kind of choke trip thing. It's kind of like an STO, but with a choke. Alexa looking pretty good, and after being out of action for a while, she had those vignettes of her in therapy, which were super cringe, so I'm glad they're not doing that anymore, and she's actually back to wrestling, and she's also not doing a straight up Fiend ripoff anymore, which is good as well. Liv goes up to the top rope and she gets pushed off by Doudrop, and her boot gets stuck on the post somehow. I don't know if there was something on there that kind of slid on the inside of her boot, but she was just hanging there. Luckily, Doudrop was able to kind of pull her off where it didn't look so terrible or so obvious that she was helping her out. But yeah, that must have been scary for Liv. Liv recovers though and hits a pretty impressive sunset powerbomb on Doudrop, and that gets the 1, 2, 3. So Doudrop's out of there. I thought that was a cool spot. Kudos to Liv for getting her over. Not trying to shame anybody here, but Doudrop's a big woman, and Liv was able to get her over for the powerbomb. So kudos to Liv Morgan. She's actually improved quite a bit from what I've seen of her over the past few months in ring. So good to see her kind of getting a bit of a feature role in this Elimination Chamber match. Last to be out is Bianca Belair. She won the right to be the last pod, and I think that kind of takes a bit of the anticipation out of it. It's like when they announce all of the entrants for the Rumble or who's going to be number 30 for the Royal Rumble. I don't like that. Part of the intrigue is whose pod's going to open, who's going to be next, and by figuring out the order beforehand, doesn't work for me. So Bianca enters and she runs wild for a bit. She does a military press on Liv Morgan and takes one of her hands away, and the announcers go nuts, absolute crazy, about how she's doing a one-arm military press, and look at the power of Bianca Belair. And yes, it is impressive, but you can clearly see both of Liv's arms on Bianca's shoulders, holding herself up. It was the fakest thing I have seen all night. So Rhea and Bianca square off with each other. They do a double suplex on Liv and Alexa, each holding a delayed suplex, kind of a one-upsmanship thing. And they go from having a mutual respect for one another to Rhea just slapping Bianca for no apparent reason. I didn't really get that. So then Bianca and Rhea square up and they have a pretty sloppy hockey fight. This was really bad. Usually Rhea Ripley's stuff looks really good and Bianca's does as well, but they were kind of just doing the whole windmill punching thing, and it looked pretty sloppy. Alexa hits the Twisted Bliss on Liv Morgan and pins her. Alexa has Rhea Ripley hooked up for her DDT finisher and kind of gets an assist from Bianca. She kind of takes both women out, which results in Alexa falling backwards and then hitting the DDT. That looked okay. And then Bianca finishes Rhea off with the KOD, the Kiss of Death, and Rhea Ripley is eliminated, which I did not enjoy because I really like Rhea Ripley and I thought she should win this match. Bianca eventually hits the KOD on Alexa and she wins the match. So Bianca Belair is your number one contender for the Raw Women's Championship, and she will face the winner of the Becky Lynch and Lita match from later on tonight. Overall, I enjoyed this match. With the chamber matches, I think that they didn't try to do too much with the cage. I think they did just enough where that it didn't look too clunky. Typically, I would say that this is probably the best women's Elimination Chamber match that I've seen. Not too many mess ups or anything that looked particularly too bad, except for the one-armed military press from Bianca. And I don't think I would have had too much of an issue with that if the announcers weren't putting it over like crazy and screaming of how it was so impressive. So overall, I would say this was a pretty good match. So next up, we had the women's tag team match between Charlotte Flair and Sonya Deville versus Ronda Rousey and Naomi. The stipulation for this match was that Ronda Rousey has to have one hand tied behind her back. Sonya Deville enters the match in a sling because Ronda Rousey had put her in the armbar and done significant damage to her. Why is this match happening? Why is Sonya Deville in this match? She's clearly injured. Lawsuit? Jerry McDevitt? Somebody make that phone call, maybe? But it's okay. We'll figure it out later. I have in my notes, Charlotte has a long entrance. A long entrance. Dear Lord. She made Roman Reigns look like he was speed running through his entrance. Ronda comes in her judo gi. No makeup for Ronda. Normally she does like the crazy like pink eye red makeup for pay-per-views. And that would make me think that maybe they told her to tone it down on the makeup for being in Saudi Arabia. After the entrances, we get a Ronda video package talking about her return at the Royal Rumble. Why is this before the match? So before the match starts, we see Ronda getting her arm tied behind her back, which is pretty comical as they just have like just a rope with a slip knot at the end of it, and they tie it around her waist and around her wrist, and you can actually see Ronda start to tighten it with her free hand behind her back because the referee didn't put on tight enough. And within minutes, this rope has come loose, and you can tell that she has free movement of this arm, and she could pull it out at any time, but she has to pretend like it's tied behind her back. Sonya gets in the ring with Ronda, and she does a big cartoon dramatic, wait, everybody stop, and she takes her sling off and starts waving her arms around like the wacky, wavy, inflatable arm tube men that Bayley used to have. She's not injured. It was all a ruse. Oh, Ronda, you fool. So we have Ronda throwing around Sonya for a bit anyway with her just her one arm, and she points to Charlotte that she wants Sonya to take Charlotte in, where we see a complete BS tag where Sonya tags in Charlotte enters the ring, and then tags Sonya back in without doing anything. And I'm going to sound like an old curmudgeon here, but that's not a legal tag. Once somebody is tagged in, they have to make contact with an opponent before they can tag out. It's in the rule book. I know that tag rules these days aren't officiated to the degree that they should or that they have been in the past, but little things like that just irk me. Like, this is a clear violation of the rules. It wasn't mentioned on commentary. I'm sure probably nobody else even cared, but I do, and this is my video, so I'm going to complain about it. Later on in the match, Charlotte gets on a full mount and starts to throw elbows, and you can see that her elbows are at least 6 inches away from Ronda's head. She is missing horribly. Normally, Charlotte's stuff is pretty bulletproof. You can't see through it a lot, but this was a bad camera angle and just bad execution by Charlotte. It wasn't as bad, but it's the equivalent to the Creepers a couple of years ago in AEW, where the one guy was just punching the mat next to Dustin Rhodes' head and was missing it by about a foot. Get a better camera angle. There's other camera angles issues that'll happen later on in this show. Charlotte hits Mia Yim's Eat Defeat. Apparently, once somebody gets released, you can just start taking their moves. I personally don't like that move. I don't think it looks particularly cool. But Charlotte's just like, screw it. I'm going to do it. She doesn't work here anymore. Ronda's selling. She gets backed up into the corner, and she just sort of looks a bit perturbed. She doesn't look like she's really in peril. She doesn't look like she's getting hurt by any of Sonya and Charlotte's strikes. She just kind of has a mean mug face going on. Her offense is atrocious in this as well. She starts trying to do a flurry of punches with just her left hand, and you can tell she's just not comfortable doing it. She doesn't look comfortable in this match at all with any of her offense. I have written down, why tie her arm up? This is Ronda's first match back as far as a typical match. She was in the Rumble, and she didn't look good there. So you put her in a tag match, which, again, is probably a good idea to get her back in the flow of things. Put her in a tag match. But then you shoot yourself in the foot because you tie her arm behind her back, and she obviously can't pull it off. I don't know if she was just perturbed by the whole stipulation, or she knew that a lot of her stuff wasn't looking particularly well. But Ronda's selling in this match, I thought it was pretty lackluster. I have written down that Naomi and Charlotte look like they're fighting in pajamas. Charlotte has just a full red suit on with black boots, and Naomi's got her fluorescent light up outfit going on. It looked like they were children fighting in their PJs. Charlotte hits a very nice sit-out powerbomb on Naomi for a 2 count. Naomi gets worked over for a little bit and is eventually able to make the tag to Ronda. Kind of a lackluster tag. All Ronda's offense looks terrible. All of her throws are off because, again, she's only got one arm. All of her punches look lackluster because she only has one arm. She is able to take down Sonya, lock in the armbar. Charlotte looks like she's going to get in the ring, maybe to try and break it up, but then thinks better of it and just leaves and lets Sonya tap out. A bit of a stinker. This was awful. There was really no flow to this match whatsoever. Again, with Ronda having her arm tied behind her back, she couldn't really get anything going. This was all just kind of clunky and didn't really work for me. Probably the right decision to have Ronda go over in this and not really have a whole lot of interaction with Charlotte and not beat Charlotte to set up their WrestleMania match. This kind of just fell flat for me. I think they kind of dropped the ball in this one. There is an on-camera for the announcers, and Michael Cole absolutely blows a gasket and starts overselling everything, and he is the most unbearable announcer in wrestling. I cannot stand him. And I know he could do better because I've heard him in the UK tournament. But having Vince McMahon in his ear makes Michael Cole just a different announcer. We get a package for Happy Corbin and Madcap Moss. The video package goes on and covers Drew McIntyre's injury and his return at the Royal Rumble. Another lawsuit, potentially, because the video package shows Drew visibly threatening Madcap Moss with a sword. And this is video evidence of attempted assault with a deadly weapon. We move on from that to Drew McIntyre versus Madcap Moss. Falls Count Anywhere match. Why Falls Count Anywhere? Who cares? Madcap making his entrance. His music is atrocious as well. You can tell that Madcap really isn't comfortable in this role that he is in. He just does thumbs up and goes woo a lot. Basically does that for the entirety of his entrance, which is pretty cringe. It gets old real quick. Drew comes out with Angela, his claymore, his sword. I haven't had a chance to speak about this, but why name the sword Angela? I know in storyline it's named after his mother, I believe it is, but Drew comes out and he's got fire going and he is a giant. He looks like a killer. He's got this big sword, and all you hear is Michael Cole say, "And here's Drew McIntyre with his sword, Angela." Kills me every single time. So Moss and Corbin jump Drew at the bell. They immediately go to the outside. Drew kind of chases Corbin to the back, but then he comes back like 10 seconds later. So Corbin comes back out, and he and Madcap immediately start to double team Drew. They go back and forth, knocking him down, sitting a few double team maneuvers. Eventually, Drew does make a comeback, and we get the move that everybody was talking about. Drew goes for a reverse Alabama slam on Madcap, and Moss over-rotates and lands directly on the top of his head. Doesn't get his arms up to protect him. Doesn't seem to do anything to defend himself. Just straight up, all of his body weight down on the crown of his head. Dear God, I thought he was paralyzed. This was very reminiscent of Stone Cold versus Owen Hart in And the reverse tombstone that ultimately broke Austin's neck and left him paralyzed momentarily. I don't know how Moss wasn't severely injured for this. I don't know how he was able to walk. With that being said, though, he was up and doing offense less than 30 seconds later. He no-sold a move that looked like he had gotten paralyzed. This was atrocious. Couldn't they call an audible on this? I know they had the referee check in on him. Corbin went and checked on him. Couldn't one of them say, hey, you look like you just got paralyzed. Maybe sell this one a little bit. Take it easy on the outside. Maybe give Drew a second to hot shot in the ring. But why in the world was he up and doing offense 30 seconds later? Again, I know it wasn't the spot. This wasn't what they had planned out in the back. But every once in a while, you've got to be able to ad-lib. You've got to kind of take what's happening in the match and go with it. And for him to get up after they showed replay after replay of him getting dropped on his head was ridiculous. That's not me not having sympathy for him. I have sympathy for him. I felt really bad for him. Again, I thought he was paralyzed. There needs to be somebody to step in and say, stay down. This looked awful. Sell it for a bit. On the outside, Corbin hits a chair shot to Drew's back, and then he and Moss double team Drew and ram him through the barricade. Later on in the ring, Drew hits a pretty sick, pretty high superplex on Moss and gets a 2 count. Moss, please take those suspenders off. You can wear them for your entrance, that's fine. But throughout the course of the match, one side of them came undone. So then he's just got 2 suspenders just dangling from his waistline. That's going to get caught on something, or it's going to poke somebody in the eye, or there's just a multitude of things that could happen. Just take those things off when you're wrestling, please. That's a recipe for disaster. Drew hits the Future Shock DDT on Moss, but is well aware that Corbin's probably going to try and interfere in some way. So he gets Angela from the ring post. Corbin gets in the ring, and Drew McIntyre attempts murder on Baron Corbin, swinging a giant sword right at his head. Corbin, of course, ducks, and Drew misses him by half a mile. But I said I wasn't going to go into the political aspects of this event. But you have a man trying to decapitate another man with a sword in Saudi Arabia. Tone deaf much? So Drew keeps the sword in hand and gets in the corner, does his 3-2-1 countdown, and hits a claymore on Moss for the win. Overall, I thought this was a decent match. Drew is a very good worker. He's probably their best big man worker right now in the WWE. Moss is okay in the ring. His gimmick is awful, but him as a wrestler, he's serviceable. The big thing, obviously, was the reverse Alabama Slam and almost seeing a man get paralyzed on national television and then almost seeing a man get decapitated on national TV. How does nobody think about these things when they're going over the match and just say, yeah, maybe we shouldn't try to simulate murder on this show? Probably not the best idea. We get a Miz interview in the back where he's talking about earlier in the night where in the kickoff show he was defeated by Rey Mysterio, basically saying that he would have won if it wasn't for Dominic interfering in the match and it was unfair and he was fighting a 2-on-1. Spoilers, I didn't watch the pre-show. I didn't watch the kickoff show. If it's not important enough to put on the main show, I'm not going to watch it. Miz teases that he needs to find a partner, somebody to even the odds against the Mysterios. And could it be Cody? It seems to heavily imply that. We'll see. I think that would be a grave misjustice to bring Cody Rhodes into the WWE and just put him in a throwaway tag match with The Miz. I know that Cody was a mid-carder when he was with the company, but you just potentially signed a former executive VP from the opposing company, and you're going to put him in a tag match? with The Miz. I hope they don't do that. Again, none of this is set in stone. Cody might not even sign with WWE. Who knows? All the insiders seem to think he is, though. But I hope they don't do this. I would hope that they would give him a bigger spotlight. This would be like if in 1998, if The Undertaker jumped ship to WCW and they put him in a tag team with Virgil. We get a video package of all the WWE superstars having a blast in Saudi Arabia. They're dancing, they're singing, they're all having a good time. Look how progressive Saudi Arabia is. The next match is Lita versus Becky Lynch for the Raw Women's Championship. Lita makes her entrance, and like Goldberg, she's an Attitude Era wrestler, so she is super over. The fans in Saudi Arabia love her. Becky comes out, and every time I see her video graphics that are imposed on the screen of her in the sunglasses, I cringe. Those look awful. I wish they would do away with those. Roman's as well, too. Roman's at the start of his matches. They're just terrible. I don't know why they do this. They look awful. They look like they were done by a high school student in his computer class. Please stop with these. Just take them off the screen. They already have stuff on the Titantron. We don't need superimposed graphics. Both women get a pretty good ovation before the match actually starts. They start out pretty sloppy to begin on. It seems like they weren't really on the same page. Lita goes in the corner and Becky charges in, and they kind of just bump into each other. Immediately redo the spot where Lita lifts Becky over the top rope, and you could tell what they were going for. But they're just things like that where they weren't really crisp. It didn't look like they had the best chemistry in the ring. The camera gets in a little bit too close a few times, and on the microphone you can hear Becky absolutely screaming spots at Lita. I don't know if she thought that they need to get back on track, or if she didn't know the camera was that close to her, but in her thick Irish accent, she is just yelling spots. She is like a female John Cena in the ring. Becky hits her second rope leg drop and hits 2 Bexploders in a row. She goes for a third, and Lita reverses it into a DDT. Gets up on the second rope and hits a crossbody. Doesn't really get the best height. Lita gets Becky in a sleeper that is not even close to her throat. She's got her like up around the forehead with her forearm, and Becky eventually makes it to the ropes without being in any type of danger, because Lita did not even come relatively close at all to having a sleeper locked in on her. Lita was never a submission wrestler when she was wrestling. I don't know why she's going for chokeouts at this point in her career. Lita goes for a head scissors, where she puts her hands on the bottom rope and tries to wrap her legs around Becky, who is sitting on the top rope. She misses by a mile. Becky has to help her get her legs around Becky's neck, and then they complete the move. Again, just not that smooth, not that crisp, kind of clunky at times. Becky hits the manhandle slam, aka the rock bottom, on Lita. Lita gets the foot on the rope, though, to break the count. Pretty good timing there by her and the ref. They got on like right at 2.5, and the ref was able to notice it and stop the count. Becky goes to the top to look to hit Lita's moonsault finisher and misses. Lita gets out of the way. Lita hits the twist of fate and then goes up for her own moonsault and hits it. She got both of her finishers right in a row, and Becky kicks out at 2. And that just completely just buried her finishers. I know everybody kicks out of everybody's finishing maneuvers these days. I know I should expect that. But she hit both of her finishers on Becky, and she kicked out. I know we don't have to protect Lita. It's not like she's going to be a full-time wrestler anymore. But I would have liked it if they could maybe have her hit the twist of fate and then miss the moonsault, or vice versa. After the 2 count, Lita pulls Becky to her feet, looks to maybe be trying to go for another twist of fate, and then Becky just locks her in hits her with the manhandle slam and gets the finish. That was another terrible camera angle. They had a super tight close-up of like the side of Becky, so you couldn't really see her lock Lita in the move. It was kind of just motion, and then she got the pin. Pretty much a flat finish. Really, really bad camera work. Afterwards, Lita gets a standing ovation from the crowd in Saudi Arabia, which was nice. Normally, I'm not a fan of them playing music for the loser. They do that from time to time, and that's another thing that kind of irks me in my old fashions. But this is probably going to be Lita's last match. This is probably, I would say, it would be her only match in front of this crowd. So I'll let it slide on here. Again, typically I'm not a big fan of that, but that would be a bit too nitpicky for me to disparage them for doing this for Lita. It's a one-off. It's okay. Next, we get a video package to commemorate The Undertaker going into the Hall of Fame. He is the first inductee for the 2022 Hall of Fame class, and he will obviously be the headliner. As I've previously stated, The Undertaker is my favorite wrestler of all time. He is probably the most deserving Hall of Famer for the WWE. He's been the flag bearer for the company for decades now, and I appreciate the fact that he's going to be commemorated in the Hall of Fame. So congratulations to Taker. Well deserved, and hats off to you. Our next match is supposed to be for the SmackDown Tag Team titles. It's the Viking Raiders versus the Usos. So the Viking Raiders come out for their entrance, and they are just completely watered down at this point. It looks like they are cosplaying at some sort of a festival. They come out just repeatedly just beating their chests for whatever reason, and I don't really understand. They must have been told to do this, I'm assuming, for their entrance. But this goes way too long. That's all they did was just beat their chest. It's the equivalent of when Madcap Moss was just doing the thumbs up and going woo. We don't actually get the match though, as the Usos attack the Viking Raiders from the side. You think they would have saw them coming? The Usos work the Raiders over a little bit on the outside and then double suplex Ivar onto Eric. And that's it. The match is called off. The Viking Raiders can't continue. What a bunch of pussies. We literally just saw Madcap Moss almost get paralyzed and he was up 30 seconds later. But the Viking Raiders can't take a suplex and get up and continue to fight. I thought this absolutely buried the Raiders, even more than they've been buried throughout their entire time on the main roster, from the name change to that terrible match that they had with the Street Profits where they were in a dumpster and the Ninjas came out. And if you have no knowledge of this whatsoever, you probably think that I'm having a stroke and I'm just talking crazy talk, but no, this all happened, and they've ruined one of the best tag teams that was out there on the independent circuit. I loved War Machine. I thought they were absolutely great. I liked War Raiders when they were NXT. They came out, their presentation was awesome. But since they've been on the main roster, I know that Vince doesn't like tag teams, but it's almost as if he has singled these two out and wants to destroy their careers so that they would never be able to have a chance to go anywhere after their contracts run out. This was awful, and it made the Raiders look terrible. We see time after time, week after week, on every wrestling show, people getting put through tables, people getting put through flaming tables, people getting slammed onto thumbtacks, onto barbed wire, getting hit with blunt objects, with chairs, falling through the announce table, falling off of ladders. But you get suplexed onto your partner, and suddenly you cannot continue, and you're supposed to be these big, badass Vikings. This was awful. For the main event, we have the men's Elimination Chamber match. This is for the WWE title. It features the WWE champion, Bobby Lashley, Matt Riddle, Austin Theory, Seth Rollins, AJ Styles, and Brock Lesnar. Riddle messes up his flip-flop thing at the entrance where he kicks his feet up and kicks his flip-flops into the air. They just sort of stick on the ground behind him, and he kind of looks back and has a chuckle at it. Austin Theory looks great. He's a very good worker. He's got a great look. He does his best in those terrible, terrible backstage segments with Vince, where Vince just grumbles into the microphone and he gets lost. He gets lost in this speech, and you don't know what he's saying half of the time, but you can tell that Theory is actually trying his best. He needs better music, though. I've talked about the issues I've had with some of the music. His is just generic, radio-friendly hip-hop. It doesn't do anything for him. He needs signature music if he's going to get over properly. You think of any of the bigger stars in any company, they have music that is specific to them or has a specific sound. Theory's just kind of blends in with everybody else's. So I think that's the one thing that he would need to really establish himself as a main eventer, is get him some good music and then give him a couple years of building him as your new top star. Roman's going to have to feud with somebody. Brock isn't going to be around forever. Lashley is getting up there in age. You need new top stars. This guy has what it takes to be that. Just don't screw him up and get him some better music. Seth comes out for his entrance. He's waving his hands about and his music now. Again, we're going to go back to music. I know I sound like a broken record here, but his music now is so disjointed with the burn it downs spliced into his new operatic music. I think they could just go without those because they don't really fit and it's kind of all mumbled together and disjointed. Seth makes fun of Riddle not wearing his... I don't know if Seth was making fun of Riddle not wearing shoes or if he saw that he screwed up his flip-flop thing from his entrance and was making fun of him for that. It's been documented that Seth's not the biggest fan of Matt Riddle, so he could have just been just taking the piss out of him at that point, but that was kind of funny. Brock comes out for his entrance. He looks to be in phenomenal shape. He looks like he's tanned a lot more than he had in the past, and he comes out smiling, which almost makes him more intimidating because he's not Beast Incarnate Brock, he's Psycho Lumberjack Axe Murderer Brock, which is terrifying. Seth and Austin Theory start out the match. I thought that was a great idea. Two of the better workers, some good back and forth. Seth hits a buckle bomb on Austin Theory through Bobby Lashley's pod, knocking the plexiglass out and hitting Lashley in the head. I didn't really see this as like an injury angle, but we'll get to that later. The second pod open is for Riddle. He runs wild on Seth and Austin Theory. We'll go back to questionable camera choices on this as we see Riddle on the top rope, and you can clearly see the camera catches him looping his leg through and putting himself in the Tree of Woe. Again, very questionable decisions. I don't know who was the agent for this match or who was in the truck, but you know this spot's coming. They all plan these things out in the back. They're supposed to know about this. Maybe don't cut to him when he's obviously crossing his legs up and putting himself in a predicament. Seth goes to the top and hits a reverse superplex on Riddle. That looked really good. AJ's pod is the next to open. He runs wild on Seth and Riddle and hits a forearm to Austin Theory on the outside. All of AJ's stuff looks great. He's still one of the best workers in the business. You can see Bobby Lashley's pod gets opened up and he's being checked on by the medical team. I wrote, is this an injury angle? It didn't look like anything happened. Obviously, at the time, I didn't know that Lashley had a legit injury and that he's going to be out reportedly for 4 months. But at the time, I thought that this made him look really weak. I didn't think it would look bad enough for Bobby Lashley to be injured. Again, in the previous segment, we just saw the Viking Raiders get injured by just a suplex. So that was something that I was kind of disappointed in. Obviously, at the time, I didn't know that Bobby Lashley had a legit injury and he wasn't actually going to be really competing in the match. We get a Tower of Doom spot in the corner, and Matt Riddle does Randy Orton's draping DDT on 2 people, and he gets down and starts doing his pound on the mat where he starts going to that dark place. The countdown begins, and it's Bobby Lashley's turn, but he's not in the pod. So Brock Lesnar just takes upon himself to just kick his way out of his pod, and he's entering the match now. He does not care if it's his turn or not. Brock immediately starts running wild and killing everybody. It's during this that they announced that Bobby Lashley was in the concussion protocol and he would not be returning for the match. I don't know. Why even have him go out there? Why couldn't they just have him come out before the match, say that he was legitimately injured and that he would have to give up the title and put somebody else in the match? Why even have him go out there? You make him look terrible with this injury angle where it doesn't look like anything really happened to him. But then again, you can't really actually do a whole lot to him because he is legitimately injured. Just don't have him in the match. Put somebody else in there. Say it's vacated. They've done it before. I don't understand why Bobby Lashley had to come out for this angle. The Brock just starts hitting F5s onto everybody. He hits Seth with one, he hits Riddle with one, hits AJ with one. They're all gone. Down to Brock and Austin Theory. Now they open up the cage door to start letting the eliminated competitors out, and Theory just starts selling like crazy that he is scared beyond all belief. And I think his facials in this were great, and why I think that he is going to be the next huge star in this company. He moves to run to the door, but Brock blocks him off. He starts running around the ring, and Brock is chasing him. He goes to close the pod to trying to keep Brock out, but Brock just kicks through the pod and gets him out anyway. I thought that was a really cool spot. That looked pretty awesome. Also, same spot that injured Bobby Lashley. So it makes him look even worse because now Austin Theory isn't injured from this exact same move being done to him, the plexiglass hitting him. Brock just yanks him out and starts beating on him some more. Theory finally gets some offense in after being pulled out of the pod. He hits a surprise low blow on Brock and does his roll through the ring into a drop kick. Hits a DDT for a 2 count. Nice that they gave Austin a little bit of offense here so he doesn't look like a complete imbecile. After Brock gets to his feet, you can tell that Austin Theory has suddenly realized that he has made a grave mistake and starts to scale the cage to try and get away from Brock. Brock, of course, chases him, is able to rip him down onto one of the pods, and begins slamming his head repeatedly into the plexiglass. It looked great. It looked like he was absolutely just killing Austin Theory. Theory did a good job selling, making it look like he was just completely out of it. After the repeated slams into the glass, Brock picks Austin Theory up on his shoulders for an F5. I really didn't know where he was going from this. I was afraid that he was going to try and throw him into the ring where the ropes are there, the turnbuckle's there if he didn't get far enough. So I was afraid that we might see somebody potentially paralyzed again on this show. But Brock turns. He throws him in onto the grating in between the ring and the cage. Austin Theory takes a hell of a bump. Like, I would be very, very scared to try and take that bump, and I'm no wrestler, obviously, but when you're falling from that height onto metal and you're supposed to land on your stomach, that seems like it would be a recipe for disaster. But Theory took it like a champ. It looked great. The camera angle was good. It looked like he was falling from 50 feet. Brock climbs down, drags Theory into the ring, and pins him 1, 2, 3. Brock's your new WWE champion. I like that Brock didn't try to do anything else to Austin when he got down from the pod. He just dragged him in the ring and pinned him. Again, you don't have to overkill everything. You don't have to hit 17 finishers to win the match. That move was spectacular enough. We didn't need anything else beyond that. So Brock goes into WrestleMania now. Champion versus champion versus Roman Reigns. I hope they unify the belts. I believe that they will, because it's just ridiculous that we have 2 world champions. I know one of them is technically a universal champion, but the fact still remains, you can't have 2 top titles. So I hope that they unify the belts. I hope that they would unify all the belts. We shouldn't have multiple tag team champs, multiple women's champions. One thing I will say was pretty funny and something I never thought I would see was Brock Lesnar kind of leaning into the crowd and taking selfies with all of the fans at ringside. If you have asked me a couple of years ago if Brock Lesnar would be on TV taking selfies with fans, I would have said a quick no. But I did listen to Pat McAfee's podcast where Brock was a guest on Monday's show. And Brock actually talks about how he has anxiety about being in front of people. He doesn't like being in front of people. So that's why most people think that he's just a jerk and a loner, because after performing and being in front of a lot of people, he needs to kind of decompress and just get away for a while. So knowing that, it was kind of nice to see, Brock out there trying to be like an actual baby face and acknowledge the fans. It could have been that maybe, again, they are in Saudi Arabia and these fans that might not ever see Brock in person again. So maybe giving them a little bit extra for coming out to the show. So that wraps up Elimination Chamber 2022. Overall, I thought this was a decent show. I hate to go like right down the middle for my first video, but I really can't say that it was terrible because it was a lot better than most of the Saudi shows. Normally those seem to be like glorified house shows. They actually put on some good matches. A lot of the in-ring work was pretty good. Shoddy camera work and catching people calling spots or doing obviously phony stuff took me out of it a bit, but I enjoyed the women's chamber match. I thought that was probably the best women's chamber ever. I enjoyed a lot of the action in the men's chamber match, although the end result was kind of marred by Lashley being legitimately injured and them having to kind of change things up. I think that really hurt the finish of Brock beating Austin Theory and not beating Lashley for the title. I believe the plan all along was for Brock to win so they could do Brock versus Roman at WrestleMania. But I think that kind of, him not pinning Lashley kind of resulted in a kind of a flat finish to the show. The Becky versus Lita match, again, is nice to see Lita out there. Bit sloppy at times between those two and kind of a flat finish for that. So that would have to go in kind of the negative of the show. Of course, the women's tag match never really got off the ground. It was just really hindered by the stipulation of Ronda having her arm tied behind her back. I didn't particularly care for that match. And of course, the Goldberg versus Roman Reigns match, as I said before, this is your typical Goldberg match. You're not going to expect a lot out of it. It's going to be just the big moves. Nothing really to hang your hat on as far as in-ring action is concerned. Just a bit boring and couldn't really get behind it a whole lot because you pretty much knew the outcome. You know that Goldberg's not going to main event WrestleMania as the Universal Champion. They're not going to do Brock versus Goldberg again. At least I hope they wouldn't do that. Who knows? I might just give them their next idea for next year's WrestleMania main event. So that is going to put a wrap on Elimination Chamber 2022 and my first video. How did I do? Did I absolutely suck? I hope I didn't, but I may very well have. If you like this video, please subscribe to my channel, and I will hopefully be posting more on a regular basis, trying to put out more probably terrible, awful wrestling content for you guys. What will I review next? I guess you'll just have to wait and see. So, I'm Paul. Thank you all for watching, and this has been the world's worst wrestling podcast.